Bore da a croeso, welcome to our show and tell on the Digital Plan project, which we've been running within the Centre for Digital Public Services. So this piece of work began in mid-2024, and before starting a full discovery, we undertook a pre-discovery, which involved a small team carrying out desk research on the current planning landscape, both in Wales and the UK. This also involved initial stakeholder engagement and mapping. So in the pre-discovery, a small team met with the Scottish Government, digital transformation team. They attended the Cardiff University Digital Planning Winter School. They met with various planning subject matter experts and stakeholders across Wales. And then they gathered insights and pain points, mapped out issues, and before moving into a full discovery. And I'm going to hand over to Andrew, who will talk us through that.
Thanks, Emma. So within the discovery, the plan was to look at the whole planning journey as best as we could across that quite wide sector and delve a lot deeper into certain areas to understand where we might best be able to affect change across the process. To do this, we took part in some user research involving doing stakeholder and subject matter expert interviews, usability testing and user interviews, talking to people within the planning space, in the third-party planning space, householders and applicants, and anybody else who we thought might be able to help us understand the process a lot better. This involved us talking to a series of different councils who are mentioned here at their local planning offices, talking to frontline staff, senior management, and also talking to wider groups such as the RTPI, POSU, and government agencies to understand how planning was done in their areas, what kind of constraints or key issues they might be facing, and where we think we could best offer some help and support. This involved us gathering a significant amount of data, which you won't be able to read here, but this is all of the kind of information that we gathered, where we went through and grouped it and understood what the key pains were, what the key issues were, and what kind of things we might need to do from that. This led us also to doing some deep dives on the websites that were used. Planning in Wales is spread across 25 different local authorities, each one with their own website and surfacing content at different levels for different audiences. So we went through and looked at as many of those as we could to understand what messages were being shared, what the content was like, and what information people were seeking or needing from that. This allowed us to create a high-level overview of what the whole planning process looked like from beginning to end, primarily from a householder view, but also taking into account what the council views, local authority views, and government views were as well. While doing this, we realised there was a very crucial area where we could offer value and where we could really delve into that, and that was our pre-application process. Throughout Wales, there is a pre-application process which allows you to submit certain details to a local authority who will assess that and give you advice on what you would need to do for a full planning application, or give you advice on where areas you may need to investigate to help smooth that journey as you go through. This was a crucial area we discovered would be very important for people to use there. So the themes that we pulled out from all of this when we analysed that and analysed the entire journey and the information we learned is that there are various places we can improve the planning application process, that the planning portal was not a user-friendly process, people have difficulty understanding the process and the language with it being very technical and very specific to the domain that it's in. We also have that pre-application made things smoother because it gave people a chance to understand that process and get a first go before they submitted full applications. There's a lot of manual back-end processes within the planning system. Communication and feedback can be difficult across various parts of the sector, and there was a significant appetite to try and improve these areas where possible. But our key thing was that the pre-application leads to that smoother application. And with that in mind, the team's plan was to try and move forward and conduct an alpha process into seeing what we could do to improve that pre-application process. I shall hand over now to Ed.
Thank you, Andrew. And so we moved on to the alpha phase, looking into improving the pre-application advice service. So we gathered together the team that's going to be working on this, a multidisciplinary team built up of delivery managers, product managers, user researchers, content designers, and service designers to cover all aspects of the process. We started this work back in September 2024, and very soon just realized that we could split this up into 3 phases of that work. The evaluation of the as-is, as the first phase, moving through to our ideation, testing and output iteration, and then a final output generation and report phase, bringing us up to the end of the financial year. But with our long-term aims and objectives for the project, those were to improve the efficiency and sustainability of the Welsh digital planning system using some of the methods listed here. But very specifically with the alpha phase of the project, we were looking to evaluate the end-to-end and get a better understanding of the pre-application process, digging into the pipeline of that as well, understanding our local planning authorities and applicant user needs, understanding the pain points that were in that process and where things could be made better and easier for the end user, and then ideation around a minimum viable product and a definition of it to address those pain points and try and smooth the process. So obviously the planning is absolutely huge, and we wanted to focus down on a very specific area. So in our scope, we determined that we were firstly looking at the pre-application advice service, as we've mentioned, but that we were specifically going to look at householders and not kind of stray so much into the larger developments. But everything that we did was done in mind to it being scalable and flexible, so that not only would it work pan-Wales, but also so that it could work for the patterns that we identify could be used throughout the planning application service from end to end. So our progress so far on the project, we started off with meeting with our partners. 3 partners were identified that are across Wales. So we travelled to each of them, sat down for user interviews, get a better understanding of their processes, and pulled all that together into partner-specific as-is process diagrams. So that gave us a very, very detailed version expanding on the work done in Discovery for the pre-application advice service. We then analysed those the as-is processes and pulled them together and combined them into a single process. We then collected a load of metrics so that we could not only see how things were in the current state of affairs, but also we could see the effects of any changes that we made and whether they were improvements or not. We developed our first prototype, which we did some usability testing on it with real-world users to get a better idea of how they were using the system. And we sat down with some other users to do some more detailed user research, interviews, and those were people who'd been through the process, either on a pre-application or without the pre-application advice service, so that we had a clear idea of how they had found the process. We also met with the planning directorate to understand the policy behind a lot of the pre-application advice service as well, so that we had that full range of visibility. So the outcomes that we've identified fall into kind of 3 different areas. So they are those for Welsh Government, those for the specific local planning authorities, and also those that are with keeping the householder in mind. And we went through those and aligned them all with our goals and our objectives from our MOUs and from our early information. We then sat down and worked out our insight statements from all of those outcomes to get a better, clearer understanding of what it is that we were trying to achieve. And then looking at using those insight statements, we went through an ideation process to develop a load of hypotheses that we could then sit down and test. So we actually generated 44 different hypotheses, so quite a lot, but breaking them down into the areas, we realized that there were some were around the awareness of the system, some were around the understanding of how things work, the findability and the value that it delivers, the design of the system and consistency on a pan-Wales basis, and finally the capacity of those local planning authorities to handle the work that was being sent to them. So our plans going forward, currently we're iterating over our prototype, and we've been generating that to develop a form that will make things clearer and lead our users through the process, helping them to understand things. We're putting that in front of real users and getting them to test it so that we can then iterate over that. And then we will be moving on once we've gained all of those insights and done the analysis, moving on to the output generation, where we will develop a report and some recommendations and hopefully some patterns that we can provide to not just our partners in the project, but to local planning authorities, pan-Wales, so that they can use that to help make some enhancements to their systems.
Diolch, Ed. So thank you all for watching. We hope that this has given you an insight into what the digital planning project has been up to. If you're interested, you can sign up for regular updates using the QR codes on screen. We're sending out 2 weekly updates right until the end of the project. We're also regularly blogging, so keep an eye out on CDPS's social media platforms. And yeah, diolch yn hwyl fawr.